This is just a sample of the audiobook. To get the complete audiobook, access the link posted in the first comment.
Angola shook the nation. The derailment of an express train on December 18, 1867, in the little upstate New York village, an event in which about 50 people died, the number would never be known for certain, was so grisly a scene that it became branded in the national imagination as the horror. No other words were necessary. Nearly 10 years later, the Angola wreck retained its powerful place in the American mind. When a train careened off a bridge in Ashtabula, Ohio in 1876, the engineer of the Pacific Express was said to have summoned up the previous disaster as the only way to understand the new incident. Thrown out of the window of his locomotive, the Columbia, as it tumbled into the Ashtabula River, the engineer was reported by his fellow trainmen to have muttered 3 words as he was pulled from a snowbank in a badly injured state. Another Angola horror. That might have happened. Then again, perhaps those words were a dramatic twist inserted by a newspaper reporter or editor in 1876. The newspaper industry, like journalism itself, was still taking shape in the era of the Angola wreck and developing into the form we know today. Raw, direct from-the-scene coverage of news, and especially of tragedy, was prized enough that editors might take liberties with sequences of events, with the precise wording of quotations, with death tolls, so as to deliver to readers that unforgettable first-person experience. The dispatches and illustrations from Angola and Buffalo in December 1867, which would appear in the nation's newspapers and magazines in the days and weeks to come, were maximized to provide a visceral sense of the devastating accident. Some audiences would learn of the wreck right away. Others would take weeks to hear of it. Mistakes would be made in the reporting of the wreck and corrected or not. In all cases, the brutality of Angola would be laid bare before the eyes of thousands of people in gritty news accounts and illustrations. Slaughter, the headlines would read. Horror, they called it. One popular magazine, with a national circulation, ran a sketch of the dead victims of Angola, charred, mostly legless and armless, in a large-size picture on its front page. That was one important reason the memory of Angola haunted the nation a decade later. The day's newspapers and its oft-sensationalistic journalists played a significant role in turning the scenes at Angola into indelible images and phrases. Extensive coverage was devoted to the wreck's grisliest details. Lengthy stories filled local newspapers and magazines from coast to coast for weeks in December 1867 and January 1868, and illustrations of scenes of the wreck, sparing no detail, appeared in such widely read national publications as Frank Leslie's Illustrated Newspaper and Harper's and Kelly's magazines. The wreck was described in newspapers in cities as far away as London. There have been as many persons killed in a railway accident before, the Times of London observed shortly after the disaster, but seldom have so many ghastly and appalling incidents been crowded into a catastrophe of the kind as at Angola. But newspapers could not manufacture the level of interest that Angola commanded. The timing of the wreck at Big Sister Creek, not far from Lake Erie, caught many Americans at a moment in which they were especially attuned to disaster and keenly aware of the fragility of life. Angola happened just 2.5 years after the end of the Civil War, a time in which people were readjusting to peacetime and civilian life, imagining themselves once again secure. Major railroad accidents of the post-war period shattered this uncertain, nascent sense of security. The Angola wreck showed that the threat of unexpected, large-scale slaughter was powerful, pervasive, and perhaps unmanageable. The fact that so many of the victims' corpses could not be identified, 19 according to the railroad, although the actual number was likely higher, added an ugly twist to this sense of vulnerability, and surely reawakened for many painful memories of the decimation of war. 2 years after the conclusion of the Civil War, it was hardly as if Americans needed the reminder. The war, lasting from 1861 to 1865, had taken the lives of some 750,000 soldiers, or about 1 in 10 white men of military age in 1860. The war came as a